but we're still moving on.
Okay, welcome to round 3 of 6 questions from the internet with Kate Campbell. Oh my gosh. So hopefully y'all have learned a lot over the last little bit, and keep sending in those questions because...
I know I've learned a lot because I'm thinking back and I'm remembering stuff.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it.
So people have asked you to write books and stuff, and well, here we go. Maybe somebody can transcribe this.
Right, they should. Just get my permission. You're going to write my biography. You're getting it for you.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
We're working on it. Okay, so here we go. Questions from the internet.
Okay.
The great beyond. First question is from Tammy Sullivan. How old? Okay, this is a little personal, and you were a little bit like, should I answer this? And I was like, yes, Kate, you should answer this. Tammy wants to know, how old were you when you began wearing glasses, and are you nearsighted or farsighted?
Well, I didn't wear glasses until, really where I think I was in my 30s or when I got into graduate school. So basically, I started needing them to read.
Oh, you've done a lot of reading.
I've done a lot of reading, right. But I think now, because I'm old now, I think they have a little bit of... I've also done a lot of driving, like staring straight ahead on interstates. Mm-hmm. So I think my newest prescription, I'm like a little... I can still see far off better than I can up close, but it's just this far off looking into the interstate. So I think I have a little bit of that now, too.
It's weird. Eyes are weird. You got to take care of them.
Yeah, I know. So I do. I wear them.
Okay. Because I remember, the first time I remember you wearing the cat glasses on the Moon Pie Dream.
Right, those were my grandmother's. They were my grandmother's. They were just like I wasn't even wearing, I was probably maybe wearing some glasses, but for that picture, those are like my grandmother in Kentucky's glasses, and they were great because they were cat eye.
Yeah.
So I just wore them for the picture because that's what we were doing for the
I'm having a flashback to 1997. You were playing city stages in Birmingham, and Mom and I came down, and I remember hearing you from the parking lot, and I was like, Mom, we got to hurry. And then you came down, and Moon Pie Dreams was the album out at the time, and you said something about your hair on that. Y'all put in some extensions or something?
Well, my beautician, Brenda, no, she didn't. She's just a great beautician. Mm-hmm. I always called her, there are beauticians, and then there are just people who cut your hair.
Yeah.
But there's beauticians, and Brenda Melendez, shout out to her. She did my hair and all that for all those early records. And all she did was, I couldn't see the back. No extensions. She just sprayed the life out of it. And I think she just pushed, notice there's no picture of me from the back. So we just kind of made it have that little bit of that 60s thing, pushed it all forward and put a bunch of hairspray in it.
It's fashion.
Fashion, right.
Okay, Tim Willis wants to know, besides family or relatives, who is your greatest influence to sing or write?
Well, that's easy. Dolly.
Dolly Parton.
There is no other. So, for those of you who haven't heard me say this, my parents gave me a ukulele when I was probably 4 or 5. So, I don't know if I thought it was a guitar. I don't know if I asked for it, if my parents were just realized I had musical interest or something. So I had a ukulele. I think I thought it was a guitar probably at that point. But anyway, so I had to learn to play the uke, which I still have a male bay, learn to play the uke, even though I couldn't read. You can look at the pictures, So then when I was maybe 7, I still didn't have a guitar yet, but my dad, they were doing this thing for my dad at the church and like an anniversary something. And my mother got the idea that me and my sister could sing. I think it was Daddy Was an Old Time Preacher Man or something like that. And I think it was a Dolly tune. I think it was Daddy Was an Old Time Preacher Man. So my mother got the record and played the record, and I figured out how to play it. But that's the thing about Dolly. From the time I was little, even on the ukulele, I could hear the songs because Dolly, they're story songs, and they're basically, she plays open chords. I know that now. But, I just figured out it was like C, F, and G, and that's what I did. So Dolly is for sure my strongest influence in who I could play as a little girl.
Country music, of course, growing up in Nashville, country music has such a strong impact on your life. And even the latest record, Damn Sure Blue, there's a lot of Johnny Cash influence.
Well,
in
Johnny
there.
Cash, Johnny Cash, I saw Johnny Cash at several times. I think I heard him at the Billy Graham Crusade, who came to Nashville, and I think Johnny sang, and Johnny and June. And then I remember seeing Johnny and June at SeaWorld of Florida when I was senior in high school.
I think we found it was late 70s, right?
Yeah, late 70s then. And also, so there was Johnny Cash, who I had a black and white picture of Johnny Cash and his signature on it that I put, on my, everybody in our bedrooms back then, we had little bulletin boards and we could put stuff. So I had a Johnny Cash, and I still have it somewhere because I think I saw it somewhere. So it was signed by Johnny Cash. Definitely Johnny Cash, Dolly. And of course, I was reading music, and so I love classical music, actually. I was taking piano, doing all that kind of stuff now. So I love that. All kinds of church music, hymns. And then when I got to junior high, I really discovered, because some teenagers, it was Emmylou, right when Emmylou was doing her first recordings. And because of the teenage, actually maybe it was a couple of college guys had discovered Emmy, and she was here in Nashville. So it was Emmylou. Dan Fogelberg, I think, was a brilliant storyteller, writer, and I knew about him also, pretty. And he used to come to play in Nashville. He was in Nashville in the 70s. So I would say, but
Dolly's number one. So she had two. So you did a record called Twang on a Wire.
Yes, I put two of her tunes on there.
Two of her tunes on there. So that was you doing a lot of country covers. And so you did Satin Sheets.
It was my tribute to women singers. And so, of course, some of those, like Dolly, she mostly sings what she writes.
Yeah.
But great songs. And yes, it was Tammy, just great tunes, great singers. And the women who, in the 70s, though, and late 60s, of course, until there was kind of a reemergence, it was kind of a weird thing with country music in Nashville. It kind of goes through good times and bad times. I knew about country music, but that's not all we listened to in Nashville. And again, I was taking piano and going to the symphony and doing all that and church music and all that kind of stuff was here in Nashville.
Yeah.
And that's why it's Music City, not just country music city. But so I have a variety of those influences. But Dolly Primo, because I knew that when I was as little as I was, I knew that Dolly wrote most of what she sang, and they were story songs.
Yeah.
And I related to that.
On Twang on a Wire, the two Dolly songs you do are Down from Dover and Touch Your Woman.
Yep.
Why those two songs?
Down from Dover is a song a lot of people don't know. It's just one of her. Of course, she's written a million songs, but something about the song. To be honest with you, I love the guitar lick on Down from Dover, the original recording, and we basically I sing both of those songs. I didn't reinvent some of the songs on Twang on a Wire. I kind of do in a different way. Down from Dover, my guys who are great musicians, we basically did Down from Dover, which is a great story song. And it just kills me every time I hear it. From the first time I heard it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it just kills me. Boy, a lot of them, if she did, she never did, say so. I mean, every one of them. Every one
to
of them
Daddy.
Touch Your Woman was to me a power, one of those. I don't even know if it was written in the 70s or not, but it was getting into, to me, it was a power song. And I always loved it. I just loved, again, I don't know if it's the music, but also Touch Your, is a power. And I think Dolly Parton is powerful. She's about being yourself. She's strong women, and she writes real stories that are somewhere in there, but they get to the core stuff, and she's not scared to write about that or sing about that.
Yeah.
Or talk about it, for that matter.
Well, I mean, this isn't the last time we're talking about Dolly on this series, but we'll move on to another country giant. We have a question from Ramona Carver Shalver, who wants to know, do you have any songs influenced by Merle Haggard?
Well, I would not say specifically Ramona. I know Ramona. She's out in California. But again, he is one of those country music people that I would put in a very special category, and then I was aware of from a time early on. And again, it's what he wrote about that. And I think this is what makes great country music. And I think when we lose this, there's a problem. But in the essence, there's still a lot of story songs, and it is a truthful in some way. And it may not be that real, story. They might be combined, but it's usually about real people and a real truth and living life. And I think if they get away from that, it doesn't mean there's not glam country songs and all that kind of stuff, but I think at its core.
I mean, don't take away my Crystal Gale and Barbara Mandrell.
Absolutely not. But they're still singing great songs. I mean, there's some element of communication with those. And I think if we get too far away from that, then we're just doing a nice pop song. But there's got to be at some core, great melody, great lyric, and some heart that's down there going, this is a real person. This is a real story.
Yeah. I know we've talked about Misery and Gin before. Merle. And then...
Well, I just can't even talk about Merle Haggard. I went to see, when I was visiting Ramona in California, so we talked about Merle and drove around Bakersfield, and it was really powerful.
You know his song, I'm Always on a Mountain When I Fall. I hate to say I'm giving up, but I believe losing's come to be a way of life for me.
He's just...
Losing wouldn't be so bad at all, but I'm always on a mountain when I fall.
Maybe my next country thing, I'll have to call up my guys.
Yeah.
I think I should do great boy songs.
I think so.
I should do that.
Because there's a power.
Well, Merle would be on it for sure.
Oh, Merle. Oh, my gosh, I got to tell you this story. So Mom and Dad went to see Merle Haggard in Birmingham, and he was on tour with another legend. And so Merle went on first, and Dad was telling the story later, and he was like, Hunter, who was that idiot we saw with Merle Haggard? Who's that idiot? And I was like, you mean Bob Dylan, Dad? He's like, yeah, he was awful.
Well, you know what makes me think, speaking of Merle, who I really liked, who's Dwight Yoakam.
Oh, yeah. My brother loved Dwight Yoakam.
Dwight, but I think of Dwight kind of in the Merle.
Well, he was in the Great Credibility Scare of the 80s in country with Lyle Lovett, Nancy Griffith, who you've worked with, and Steve Earle.
Yeah, I like all those, though.
Yeah. Country music, y'all.
Outlaws. They're kind of different, but that's okay. I like different people.
Yeah, different's good. Tim Lowry wants to know, you collect interesting and amusing roadside signs. If you could write your own, what would it say?
I don't even know. There's too many out there that people say it for me. I don't know.
You're a collector.
I'm a collector. I'm not sure I would have a, road sign.
I say to myself all the time, Jesus is Lord of Picayune and Mississippi welcomes you.
Yes, and that is one of my favorites. I have to say, and the only reason I found that, you have to look for that one.
That's on Genesis Blues, on the Blues and Lamentations.
It is just because my sister lived in Picayune for a while.
Okay.
But I was on one of my trips, and that's another reason people go, well, why do you drive? I go, because I stop when I want to stop. I have Coke whenever I want, and I take back road. I have a Coke whenever I want.
I stop when I want to stop. I have a Coke whenever I want.
That should be in a song.
It does. It reminds me of the woman from Sea Rock City, just breaking free.
Right.
I'm going to Sea Rock City. I have a Coke when I want.
That's right. Stop when I want. Take pictures, meet weird people in country stores. I know. But my sister lived in, I don't know if Betsy told me about it first or I just saw it. I got off the interstate. It's a hard one kind of to find, and then I think they realized that people liked it and they made some new ones lately. But, originally it was more of one of those. I like them. I like the ones that are kind of, you can tell like somebody painted themselves or, stuck up in front of a church. Sometimes it's own church signs. Those tend to be the most interesting, I should say. But you never know when. And the main thing too is that's why I have all these songs too, like Jesus and Tomatoes and stuff, because I'm very interested in how Jesus does show up on a lot of signs and how he's usually paired with some things you wouldn't think Jesus being paired with. This is interesting to me. And it's not just the South. We seem to have more in the South, but I have to say I've driven across America many times now and I love it, and you'd be surprised. Or not.
Let's move on. Tom Claypool wants to know, do you still have Joe Lewis's furniture? Which is a reference to Joe Lewis's furniture from the Monuments album.
Right. Well, I did not have Joe Lewis, but I do know who did have Joe Lewis's furniture.
Okay.
And, well, first of all, I think about Joe Lewis because of my grandfather, who I spent a lot. My grandfather here in Nashville, he loved to watch the fights. And when I was a little girl, I would go spend the night with my grandparents. They lived, those of you who are from Nashville, they lived in Madison. Actually, my dad grew up in East Nashville, and where we're talking now, parts thereof. But they moved out to, my grandparents built the house in Madison the year I was born, 1961, I think. So that's amazing how when they were building that, people were living out in Madison.
Well, I mean, that was a hot spot. Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline all lived out in Madison at the time.
Absolutely. Everybody was moving out. Yeah, I remember.
And Kitty Wells.
Kitty Wells. I saw her in the grocery store one time. Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I saw her at the Kroger. So my grandfather, I remember watching Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, big fights. My grandfather. And I remember this one time, it was a big fight, and we were watching it. And it was probably Ali and what was the big fight? It's probably one of those. And my grandfather goes, these guys are pretty good, but Joe Louis is the best there's ever been. And I'd been carrying that phrase around with me forever. And I went down to Birmingham, where Ira is from, and where you're from, Gardendale, Alabama. And my father-in-law, Mr. Campbell, had a little house on their property that he would rent out that I think was Mr. Campbell's grandfather's little house. They kind of have a little cove, down there where there's the Campbell's house, and there was then his mother's house, and then whatever. And it's this little house, and so Mr. Campbell is a retired State Farm insurance man. So anytime someone was moving into the house, the little house that was his great-grandmother's or whatever, he would, because he's a State Farm man, he would go down and say, is there anything I can help you to do? So this one day, he goes down there, and he's just rented out the little house again, and there's all this furniture on the front porch, and the guy's moving in. Mr. Campbell says, well, is there anything I can do for you? And the guy says, see this furniture? That's Joe Louis's furniture. And I said, oh my gosh. So I wrote it down. Me and I, we get back to the car to drive down, so I go, did you just hear that?
Yeah.
That furniture, see that furniture, this guy is renting from Mr. Campbell, all the furniture's on the front porch, he's moving in, the first thing he says to Mr. Campbell is, see this furniture? It's Joe Louis's furniture. And because I remember my grandfather talking about how much he loved Joe Louis when I was growing up, so I said, okay, this is going to be a song. But that song took me about 2 or 3 years to write. I couldn't figure out how to write it. And one thing is about songwriting, in the story, you have to write it in the correct person who is speaking in the song. And when I was first writing that song, it was just like, the question is like, did you really have Joe Louis's furniture? No. But it does not work. The song does not work in third person. It doesn't. It's not powerful. It doesn't work. So you have to let the story tell the story. And when I changed it to first person, I've got Joe Louis's furniture in my den. Best there's ever been. He was the best there's ever been. It made the song. So it took me. I don't know how long it took me to write that song now, but I didn't. It took me a while to get it all together. But it's just those are things that interest me. Those are real stories about real people, and those are years apart. My grandfather watched, saying Joe Louis is the best there's ever been, between the guys saying, see that furniture, that's Joe Louis's. And those of you who know Joe Louis's story, I mean, like he's from Alabama, but he hardly ever went back there, and nobody ever really talked about him or, anything like that. It was kind of like whatever. And then, he had financial troubles, and who knows when the furniture or where it came from. But yeah, sad. It's a sad story in many ways, and it shouldn't be. Good questions.
There's so much to say.
Good questions. I know I'm remembering stuff now. It's good.
All right. Donna Bond wants to know, can you list all the places you have lived?
I probably could. You mean
got
like
New
the
Orleans?
Streets? I was born in New Orleans. I think my parents lived in seminary housing.
Okay. In New Orleans.
And, but there was a weekend church that was technically, I think, in Mississippi, but it was like 100 miles. So people want to know about how this will go back to the very first song of, Mississippi and Me. My parents, one of the stories, I switched stories around, but it was a weekend church. So he was still in seminary. So my parents had a white VW, and they would take me, and we'd on the weekend go to this church, which was right on the Alabama-Mississippi border. And then on Sundays, after the Sunday evening church service, this deacon would give my daddy like a silver $1, but he would put it in my hand because I'm little, so I would have the silver $1. And my parents would stop on the way back to New Orleans and get like a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. I don't know how many times I heard that story. So that's where that story came from. And then my dad's first church was in Sledge, Mississippi, which is the northern
Which is
first real
Hollywood.
church, which is close to Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Close to Hollywood, Mississippi, and that's where we're in Mississippi, and then
And then on
makes
to
sense.
Nashville.
and then back to Nashville, which is where again my father's from.
Yeah.
So we were in Nashville until I was a junior in high school,
And then to Orlando.
and then my dad moved to Orlando, and then I was only in Orlando till I graduated from high school, and then I back to school in Birmingham, and
And Auburn? You were at Auburn?
I was Auburn for my master's degree.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to make anybody mad here, but I'm an Alabama fan. But I liked going to Auburn. I shouldn't say that. We might have to edit that.
Well, no, it's been said now.
I know it's too late. I loved going to Auburn, and probably one of the people who's really had an influence on my life was my professor at Auburn, who is probably the most well-known Southern historian. South Census of War was my major professor. His name is Wayne Flint, and changed my life, taught me how to write differently. You know, I mean, in the end, it all affected my songwriting as well.
Yeah.
So, great times in Alabama, and of course, Ira is from Gardendale, and I've spent. You know, people go, well, in Mississippi. I go, well, you know, I've actually lived in all those places. But in songs, you have to you change. Sometimes you change things on purpose. Sometimes it's just because they sing better. Sometimes they happen there. Sometimes they happen somewhere else, and you want to change the names to protect the guilty. As I always say. So, you know, whatever sing. So, but it's all in there. I will say that most of what I write has been a story or something in my life. I mean, not always, but I'm also drawn to very specific stories about people. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's why it could be the songs about Fordlandia or anything like that. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like we mentioned Gardendale, but we didn't talk about the welcome sign to Gardendale.
Welcome to Gardendale. Have I used that? I didn't.
No, you haven't used it in a song. You should, because the sign to Gardendale, well, there's one still, but it used to be all the signs. Nice people
live here. I
Nice
know.
people
No,
live
I know.
here, which is so like the Southern nice mentality of like, you know,
Right.
because it's called Gardendale because they changed the name in the 50s because it was called originally called Jugtown. You know all this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You know, my mother's was the head of the Gardendale Historical Society for a while, so
know everything. I know.
we know everything.
Yeah, nice
Yeah.
people. And I, you know, I knew that we were talking about the blue and gray and all that kind of stuff. Well, I knew that nice people lived here. I haven't used it in a song because, again, all those years that I went from Birmingham to Nashville when I was in college in Birmingham, on the weekends, I would ride with my friend Allison Young because I didn't have a car. I know this. I didn't have a car. My own car the whole time I was in college. So my grandmother in Nashville, I'd go to visit her, and my friend Allison, she had a car. And so this was before the interstate was completed, only through Gardendale.
Yeah, Highway 31.
Because the governor, they were having fights and they wouldn't, finish the...
Fights in Alabama politics.
I know, it's wild to even think about. So we'd be like Friday afternoon and we'd get there we'd be on the old Highway 31. And then we get to Gardendale, it'd just be like sitting there for an hour. And that's when I, first started seeing the sign, welcome to Gardendale. Nice people live here. And I thought, that's so nice. But I haven't used it in a song. I should really.
I would lose my mind if you
I
did.
bet there are other signs like that throughout America. I'm surprised I hadn't seen another one.
I know, but nice people live
Gardendale.
here.
I know.
Oh, okay. Final question, and we're just. This is the longest one we've done, but
It's
why
okay.
not?
People like it, I think.
I think so. So this is one that we added, and I'd never heard the answer to this question, so let's just ask it. Where were you on August 16th, 1977, when you found out that Elvis had passed away?
Okay, of course, I was still in Nashville, because that's where I was from. And I may be wrong. I don't know why I think it was a Sunday night. We could double check that. But I was with a group of kids from the church. I do know that. And there used to be a Pizza Hut, and it may still be there on Lebanon Road. Now, that's how y'all who don't understand what I just said, Lebanon. But Lebanon is how we say it. That is, I grew up in Donaldson, which is the Opryland part of town, those of you who were listening.
It was a Tuesday, Kate.
It was a Tuesday. Well, for whatever reason, I was with, because I don't know that I had my license. So I was with a group of kids. Maybe we'd gone to, who knows, maybe there was some game or something. We were at the Pizza Hut. I do know we were at the Pizza Hut on Lebanon Road. and they play the radio through the Pizza Hut or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They somehow either we just heard about it or they came on, whatever, and they started playing Elvis songs,
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what I remember being at the Pizza Hut and when Elvis died. And, because even before that, I was always sad about Elvis because I think people forgot, things got out of control. And the newest HBO thing is phenomenal. I saw it
The
in the hotel
Seeker,
room.
right?
I don't know there was the thing on public television that they showed, but year or two ago they had an HBO thing on Elvis, which I thought
It was The Searcher. Elvis Presley, The Searcher.
I thought
that was fabulous.
Well done. It was great. But even when I was a little girl, I was kind of sad about Elvis because I kind of thought that Elvis gave up after a while. I think he couldn't see. I don't know.
Yeah.
He just gave up. And of course the drugs and all that kind of stuff. But I was immensely sad. And maybe I wouldn't have said that at the time. I didn't know, but maybe I wasn't surprised. Mm-hmm. In a weird way, I don't think I would have been able to say that back then, but I think that was a part of it was sad, but probably some part of me was going, in a way, he just gave up.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a life of his own. I think people used him,
100%.
And the other thing is, his manager, Colonel Tom's house is over on Gallatin Road. Mm-hmm. So my grandmother lived in Madison. So I knew from the time I was growing up, every time my grandmother's house wasn't very far from Colonel Tom's house. And every time we'd go over there, it was like, oh, that's where Colonel Tom's house is.
That's correct. Yeah.
We knew it the whole time.
Okay, so this is way off topic, but I got to show you this. It's 1979 and it's 2020. So it's Geraldo Rivera looking into, and he's interviewing the doctor who prescribed Elvis everything and the people who did the autopsy. And it's just the parallels to what went on with Michael Jackson, just getting the medication on demand. It's just, and it's so sad because nobody's going to tell him no.
No. I think it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
If people, though, I would say, there's Dolly and there's Elvis. Those are probably two people that really influenced me personally. And
Bookends of Tennessee.
Yeah, they are. And if you think about it, if people don't want to know what a genius Elvis was, his voice, you just spend a night watching those early 1950s. And, the thing is, in the 68 special, that's him really playing the guitar, y'all.
Yeah.
Really playing the guitar and singing. That is an amazing, that to me is just
looking back, his life was so short. It seems like the comeback special is akin to like when Johnny Cash got with Rick Rubin and did the American recordings toward the end of his life.
Yeah.
I just find that period. Emmylou Harris, when she did Wrecking Ball with Danny Lenoir, trying to kind of change the course. I find that chapter in artists' careers so fascinating.
Well, and I like it that some people have the vision to want to work with those great artists and give them that, it's okay. What do you want to do, Johnny? Yeah. What do you really want to
It's like Brandy Carlisle's doing a record with Tanya Tucker right now.
Right. Why,
Isn't that great?
Right. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, Tanya Tucker, she's like my age, so when she had Delta Dawn, let me tell you, that's another song I could sing pretty early on. Let me just say, all because of Tanya Tucker.
Well, Delta Dawn, getting into the weirdness of the South and Southern Gothic. There you go.
There it is.
Well, I think go listen to Delta Dawn again.
Everybody should. A 13-year-old, and I always say Tanya. I know it's Tanya, whatever. I say Tanya. It must be my accent. But I don't think she'd be mad at me.
No, she'd be fine.
Yeah, she's we're close to the same age, I think.
Till next time, Kate Campbell.
One more thing. I was at Opryland the day it opened and the day it closed. I just want everybody to know that. If you remember the theme park, I was there the day. That's a part of it. I remember when they built it, and I remember before that, there was Rudy's Farm Country Sausage.
Okay.
They owned all that land. Just so people, if you want to know, I remember that. I remember when they built Briley Parkway.
Okay, so somebody asked about Kate's history with Opryland theme park.
Yeah.
We'll get into that next time.
Yeah.
I'll make a note. Thank you.
You're welcome.